Well, hey there, sweet peas. Welcome back to Friendless. I'm your pal, James Avramenko, back once again with a brand new episode with very special guest, musician, podcast host, fledgling journalist, and very good friend, Nathan Iles. Nathan and I discuss incrementalism in culture, how to touch your friends consensually, and what are the best classic video games that still hold up. All that and so much more. Nathan is an absolute joy, and you're going to love this episode, so buckle up. It's time to lean back, get comfy, set your volume at a reasonable level, and enjoy my interview with the one and only Nathan Iles here on Friendless. This week on Friendless, I have returning guest Nathan Iles back once more to give me a little update on where he's been in life. I've managed to see you once in person in Vancouver, but it's still, this distance, man. This distance is killing me. So why don't we start with how the fuck are you, man?
I'm great, and happy 9/11 to you, good sir. To all who celebrate.
Yes.
I've gotten that Norm Macdonald clip about 6 times today, which I think is very telling of my friend group. Have you seen that?
I haven't. No. Which is it? What is this?
It's on his talk show, and I mean, God bless him, rest in peace, right? But it's I can't remember the context, but he just says 9/11, and then it's dead silent, and then everyone just starts laughing for no reason because it's so uncomfortable. And it's Norm Macdonald, so even just the way he says it is just like
9/11.
Literally, yeah. So I'll be passing on the love. No, I'm good, man. I'm super stoked to be back. Yeah, friendship. Yeah, that was a lovely day when we saw each other in Vancouver. It was really nice. We went to like a gay bar, I think. We had some lunch, right?
Yep.
That whole street in Vancouver is pretty sick. That's like
Dating.
that's like the queer central of Vancouver, right?
Yes. Yeah. It's it houses some of my most favorite and some of my least favorite places to go in the city. But yeah, it's a magic little street. It's strange, actually. It's like it's getting kind of like, from what I understand, sections of it have been sort of like stratified a little bit, especially kind of post-pandemic, but it is still very much the hub, and it's the best place in town.
That's kind of happening in a lot of queer spaces, I find.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to my partner about this like recently, like so I've been shooting a lot of live events through school because I'm doing like a photojournalism thing right now, and like I've been shooting a lot of drag shows and a lot of AFAB like folks, doing drag that kind of is in this intersection between like burlesque and drag and stuff like that, and we just had Calgary's own weird. We have our own little weird pride parade in like September. I don't know why, but they I think it's because I think the justification is it's really close to the Stampede here, like globally.
Right.
So I don't know. It's weird. We have our own queer thing, but yeah, and like the parade was really fun, but also very like, Synovus had a float and like ATB Financial, right? And like it's very weird when like there's a crowd of like from a swingers club on a float, and then right after them is like Engineers of Calgary. It's very
they're all like waving with their one little rainbow flag.
When it's like no shit that like shitty conservative types are like, oh, kids are being exposed to like sexuality because like there was a bearers float with dudes in like BDSM gear, right? But it's like it's the banks that are out of place there, not them. Like this is it's supposed to be a rebellious counterculture thing, and it's becoming very like Disney World. And I don't know if that's a net positive or not, but like I don't know. I have a lot of thoughts on like I feel like so many progressive things are being packaged and sold now, and I'm like, okay.
Well, this is something I've been thinking a lot about actually recently, is this idea of like, it's like, oh God, I'm not by no means an expert in this. This is me more just musing on stuff, but it's like, I think often about, and I've been talking about this on the show a little bit in recent weeks and months, is this like, there was this like really, really uncomfortable conversation that was going on during the lockdowns of COVID, where everyone was like, this is the first pandemic we've ever lived through. And it's like, no, if you were alive in the 80s, there was a pandemic that went on that fucking Fauci was in charge of, and like that wasn't even the first pandemic he let get out of hand. It's just that it was killing predominantly gay people, and so no one gave a shit, and what's happened in the last couple of years, there's all this conservative dog whistle talking about how like everything's gayer now, and everything's, oh, why do you have to shove it down my throat? All the fucking dog shit they always say. But it's like, it's because from the mid 90s to now, queer people were either dead or traumatized or were being born. So we're only now 30 years removed, finally at a state in our culture where we have queer people who are at a level of like cognitive development where they have personalities and where they have like their own bank accounts and shit. And I mean, this is not even to talk about like the like erasure of queer history within even the queer community. Like there's like little baby queers who don't even know the history, let alone straight people. But what's happened as well is that, they call it, what is it called, like rainbow capitalism, right? It's like
Hmm.
the reason why queerness is so much more visible from a capitalist perspective, as I see it, is that they figured out how to monetize it. They figured out how to be like, here, we're going to put some rainbows up at Target, and that's going to make you shop here. And so it's not about actually reforming systems. It's not about actually creating any kind of equitable demonstration of acceptance. It's about like, oh, here's a new population that we can pull money from. And it's very cynical. And I've really grown to like internally kind of loathe the rainbow in a certain way because it's just like, oh, fuck off,
I can't remember how I read this, but it's like, you're not being represented, you're being marketed to, right?
Mhm.
And
That's exactly it.
there's two movies recently that I feel embody this. One is Across the Spider Verse.
Okay,
If you've, I don't know if you've seen it or not.
I haven't seen it yet. I
Um,
haven't been to movie theaters in a long time. I
that's
just,
fair.
yeah.
The other one's that Barbie movie, actually, that
Mm,
just came out.
mhm, mhm.
And neither of them I think are bad, right?
Yeah,
In the Spider Verse movie, there's a spider punk,
gotcha. Okay,
and he spouts all this like anti-capitalist shit and rhetoric, and it's like it's actually it's kind, it seems like it's truly done. Like he's wearing actual punk bands that are like not, like the Clash or the Ramones, like the bands
okay.
everyone knows and stuff like that. That sounds so fucking like hipstery of me, but
You're
you
not a
know,
real punk. You only know the Ramones, man.
clearly someone like actually really gave a shit about how Spider Punk was like written and drawn, right?
Mhm,
But
mhm.
he's still in like a $400 billion Sony like Spider-Man movie, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
he's still the butt of a lot of jokes, right?
Mhm,
And
mhm.
the Barbie movie has a lot of extremely, extremely huge, like anti-patriarchal and feminist messaging, which
Mhm.
is I think cool and a net positive, but it's still a toy movie. It's still
Yeah.
Mattel, right?
Yep.
Like their logo's right there at the top. So it's like,
Mhm.
and it's also very heteronormative. Like
Yeah.
there are queer elements, but they're very like laced in there. They're not
Yeah.
upfront, right? So
Yep.
it's
Yep.
like I'm like, you know, I don't know if it's a net positive or not that like these things are, and a lot of people like just need, again, my partner who really liked the Barbie movie was had a really good point. She was like, um, a lot of people need it hammered out to them, really
Oh,
basically,
big
right?
time. Big time.
So overall, it's a net positive that is there, but it's just we're
Mhm.
just in such a clown world. It's like, man, like,
Oh, yeah. It's all fucked.
yeah,
I think one of the problems I encounter these days is that, like, I have a deep philosophical belief in incrementalism. Like, I don't believe in, like, blast the system down and start from the rubble. Like, that never does any good. That leaves power vacuums, that leaves for, like, that's never good, is to just, like, implode. But incrementalism isn't sexy, right?
mhm,
Because it means like, oh, you're only gonna get so far because we can only get as far as the furthest back person is willing to push.
yeah,
And so, like things like Barbie, with these messages that sometimes people have never even considered. So like if you're starting with their gauge way to the left and you want them all the way to the right, you're never going to do that in 2 hours. You're going to get them just like a little tick up,
mhm,
and then a little tick further and a little tick further, and it's going to take generations. The problem that we're seeing, as I observe it, is that like we're also seeing the end of the planet coming much sooner than expected from some people, and also like right on time from what the scientists have been saying. But like, so it's like there's a desperation and there's a real frantic energy coming out of this need to change, but it's impossible to change everything overnight the way it has to. And so I just don't, I don't like slipping into genuine cynicism and genuine like defeat, but it doesn't feel like it is possible to change everything that needs to change meaningfully in the time that it needs to change. you know so it's like something like Barbie is a net positive if we had a longer timeline for I also have problems like and I know I recognize that it's from the position I'm in of being like a straight presenting white man,
yep,
is that like it's easy for me to talk about incrementalism, and it's this idea of like when it talks about like culture issues and stuff like that, when it's talking about like stuff, often I'm like, well, there's like no gay marriage on a dead planet, right? Like, or like there's no culture war on a dead planet, and so it's like
Hmm.
I feel like we kind of get lost in the weeds of like these rights that are actually nebulous and sort of imaginary, and financial strife and all these things where it's like all of it is real and feels real, but at the same time too, it's like there are bigger existential threats to the grander thing that we sort of lose sight of. And I don't know. I don't even know what point I try to raise when raising that. It's just everything's fucked, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I mean, because then the more conspiracy minded part of my brain's like, well, you know, if we're talking about this, then we're not talking about the climate and whatnot, right? So,
Exactly.
because it's like, I don't know, it's very useful, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I saw this crazy thing that was talking about how, the like the submarine that imploded a month or
Yes.
two ago,
Yeah, yeah.
and they were talking about how the moment it imploded, everyone knew. They knew they were dead instantly. They and like there was like a big like US carrier nearby that heard the explosion, and there was some other like government craft that heard the explosion. Like they all knew that moment they were dead, but they still spent like millions of dollars on this like week long like countdown to how much air they have in there, and they were like pretending to search for them, and there was all this like bizarre like circus around it when they knew right then and there that they were all dead. And so it's just like it's this really bizarre like what the fuck were they distracting us from, and speaking of like conspiracy theories, like the whole sort of like conspiracy theory culture has gotten so less fun in the
Oh
last
God.
few decades, right? But it's like it really does feel like, well, what the fuck were they doing to distract us,
I think I remember something else happening that, but then Twitter was blowing up with that, and then
Yeah,
like I totally fell for it. Like I was
of
having
course.
nightmares imagining being stuck in like a metal tube in the
Oh,
dark net, like in the dark. It was no lights in there, right?
yeah,
So
no,
like just
none.
just waiting to die,
Oh,
basically.
yeah.
Like
Well, and
oh
they like
God,
they
but
the breakdown of the actual event was horrifying. Just absolutely horrifying. Like and like the way I saw it described was that like in their last moments, like they like they free fell like half a mile in total darkness, with the only sound being like the like warning alarms going off, that and they could hear the like the craft like cracking, and then in like less than a second they were atomized, like they were literally just made into just like chemistry,
that's some Warhammer 40K shit, man. That's some
Really
like
though, like, yes, like, it really watching that video breakdown actually really made me be like, "Oh, yeah, no, there were people there." And, like, yes, like, the guy was totally, like, his hubris took them all down, but it's like, there were humans there, and
yeah.
it's like,
There's
what
a
a
there was a kid
horrific
on there.
event.
There was like an
Yeah,
18-year-old, wasn't there?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so it's just like, ugh, ugh, it's all just icky,
I had lots of like weird conversations. Like on the other end of it, where I had a lot of my more quote unquote progressive friends who were posting like, "Fuck these millionaires, it's what they deserve," and I'm like,
Yeah,
I mean, you don't get extra points morality wise for like dancing. These people are dead now, and they
yeah,
died horribly. I mean,
yeah,
yeah, they were like really privileged and whatever, but like,
yeah,
you don't get extra brownie points for being like, I don't know. Maybe I'm just
yeah.
getting older, but I'm just like, it's just lame. It's like,
No,
come on.
I'm with you. I'm with you entirely. I hate that attitude. I hate that. I do my best to not wish death on anyone, and I know that again that comes from like a place of, there's a type of privilege within that to not have to hold that kind of vigilance, and to have the ability to parse things out through a calm and safe place. But it's like, but I'm in that position, so I don't need to be another angry white guy, like there's
Hmm.
enough of those in the world, like
I'm angry. I'm straight. We
right.
got a podcast.
Fuck.
Fuck yeah.
Let me talk about Joe fucking Rogan. You know what? We are way off track though. I want to double back on something because, as we mentioned that you have been on the show before, but you are such a multifaceted artist, and you have your finger in so many different pies, and I'd really love for any listener who may not be familiar with you, maybe they haven't checked out the episode, maybe they haven't, they don't know who you are. So I've started opening interviews with a very blunt question of Nathan, who the fuck are you?
That's the basis of so many years of therapy for me. Um,
That's a common answer. I like that. I like that.
yeah, I mean, if I define it by what I do, like, there's kind of three main things I'm like doing right now. One is I'm trying to be a journalist. That's kind of the new career thing I'm like pursuing. So I've had some writing and some local stuff here in Calgary, mostly with a magazine called the YY Scene
Mhm.
slash The Scene, which has been really cool. Um, and I did an opinion piece for The Escapist, which is like a video game magazine, which is like I was super excited about. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I
I'm
saw you post
trying
about
to.
that. That was awesome.
Yeah, it's fun. I just love writing. I mean, you can
Mhm.
relate, right? So, and
Big
it's
time.
like I was like ruthlessly, I was like, how do I take that and make money out of it? Because I was kind of like, I wanted to go back to school, and I was like, well, I mean, it's like an English degree or like journalism, and honestly, like journalism, which is funny because journalism, a lot of people would say it's dying. I wouldn't agree
Okay.
with that, but like a
No.
lot of people would say that. But you can take that and parlay it into communications or so many other like ways that unfortunately are very like financially incentivized or
Big
whatever you
time.
want to. I was just like, I that's the way we gotta like be, right? Is like
Mhm.
how do I sell myself to like
Mhm.
pay rent? So
Mhm.
that's a thing. And then yeah, I'm in a band called Brain Bent. It's like a new wavy kind of post punk. It's like Devo. That's kind
Mhm.
of what we always do a capstone with it on. We just played Slut Island like a couple
Fuck
months ago,
yeah.
which
Hell yeah.
it was super fun with a band from Brooklyn called oh my god, Olaf.
Okay.
No, Gustav. That's what they're called. They're very cool. And we
Oh,
were laughing because our drummer's name is Gus. So, um, but yeah, and that's fun. We're recording right now, so that's and we're hoping to go on tour around Canada next summer and spring when I'm done school. That's kind of the tentative plan. If
fuck yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you've applied for any grants or anything, but like
Oh yeah.
it's just like this waiting game of like you write it and then you just like you don't even when you don't get it, you don't even hear from them half the time,
No.
right? Or
No. No.
it
They
wound
just
up in someone's
there's like the form letter of like, oh, by the way, you know that thing you waited 6 months for? Yeah, you didn't get it.
yeah. Yeah, and it's yeah, a lot of self-reflection
Mhm.
built into like trying to nicely ask for free money to like do a
Mhm.
thing that you like love artistically or whatever,
Mhm.
right? Because I don't really think of it in that terms when I'm doing it, but
Yep.
to like take it further, we have to, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, it's that
and
thing
then
of it's the thing you're talking about with both these avenues is that it's like you can hate capitalism and still accept that like it's those are the rules like
oh yeah,
because your choice is either like okay I go live off the grid and I die because I have no survival skills or I play the game and like that sucks yes but it is the game that it's the deal we were dealt and so like you kind of gotta just play it as best you can
yeah. Hey, I live where I live, and where I live,
exactly
they just raised rent by like 30% overall. You're in Vancouver, you know the feel.
big time yep
Oh man. God, I just saw a really sad, like one-off little news segment recently about like it was a single dad who makes like 65K a year and he lives in Vancouver and he can't find a place to live for him and his son.
yep
That's fucking insane.
yeah.
But
No, it's fucked. It's completely fucked, and it's just gotten worse. Like I didn't realize when I got here it was bad, and since then, like I've stayed in the same place, year and a half, almost 2 years now, and I didn't realize how bad it's gotten in even in the interim by being off the market and not having to look. And like my place is not cheap, but it's way cheaper than.
Mhm.
I was kind of kicking the tires recently because I was like, maybe I'll move. Who knows? And I looked and I was like, oh fuck no, not a chance.
Yeah.
you know.
Well, and like, the reason anyone lives in my shithole city is because it's affordable. And even that's going out the window. Like,
Mhm.
I have friends looking at basement suites that are like 2 grand now
Yep.
and whatnot, right?
Yep.
In Calgary. Who wants to pay 2 grand to live in a basement suite in Calgary, right?
Not a chance. Not a fucking chance.
Like
Yep.
we're very lucky. We'd probably be with my mom right now if we did. Like we're in a very old house. Our landlord's not paying a mortgage on it, so like
Mm,
it's just passive income for her. So
mhm.
whatever. But
Fuck yeah.
yeah, and then my third thing is I started a podcast called Last Gen Arcades. Um, my co-host is a guy named Will Cowan. He's really cool. Uh, he's actually no, he fucking sucks. If he's listening to this, you know, just know that the ominosity is still there. But or that's not the word.
It is the
Enmity,
word now.
enmity, whatever.
The
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
animosity, enmity. Yeah,
I said ominosity, and that's like a
yeah.
metal band I was into in high school. So,
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
but yeah, it's like a look at retro video games. We do series where we like half of it is delving into like the developments of a classic game,
Mhm.
which is really fun. And then the second half is we play it and we see how it holds up today.
Fuck yeah.
And lots of we've modeled it on Wizard and the Bruiser, which is on the
Yes.
Last Podcast Network. So lots of like,
Fantastic show.
yeah, lots of foul humor and stuff. And like I do a lot of the research and writing, and then Will does all the editing, and then we both host it. And we've been shifting towards having a guest at all times because the 3-person format's pretty awesome
Mhm.
for
Mhm.
that kind of like discussion, right? But it's really fun, and we're like just up to. I mean, episodes take a while to come out just because like I really hate shows that don't have any sort of like you mentioned Joe Rogan. Like I just feel like they're just chatting for like hours,
Sure. Yep.
and even like before we did today, we had some ideas of what we wanted to hit. Like I love that. I hate
Mhm.
shows that are just really meandering and just like
Totally.
right. So we try and like have it really researched and really outlined and really like edited and tight. But as a result, it takes. I mean, we aim for every 2 weeks, but it's hard, right?
Fair.
Also, Will works like a million jobs, and I'm in school, so
Super fair. Is there a game recently that you played that like cuz I mean I obviously play video games currently, but I was raised on them and so old school gaming is like near and dear to my heart. Is there a recent game that you played that like totally held up and you were like almost surprised by how good it still is?
yeah, Doom, like the original Doom,
Mhm.
right? Which it's weird. Our guest we had for that is this guy named Colin Munch, and he had a really good point where he was like, when people talk about their favorite food, they don't say sandwiches, right? It's like so
Mm.
foundational. And Doom's kind of like that. Like I don't think people don't think of it as like their favorite shooter or whatever because it's like it created shooting games
Yeah.
essentially, right?
Well, they used to
But
not
it
call them shooters. They used to call them Dune clones.
literally, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But like man, it is still so fun. Like that's my
Yeah.
bar with any sort of shooting game. If you can't be as fun as that 30-year-old goofy fucking heavy metal game,
Yep.
why do I care, right? And like also it runs everywhere. Like I had it like I could probably get it on that Zoom recorder I have sitting around. I
Big
saw
time.
it. We were running through funny ports of it, and like it got ported to a pregnancy test at one point.
Oh my god. I
Like this,
love it.
but you can like mod the shit out of it. It's great. It's like so
Mhm.
fun. It's so like pick up and play a level and then put it down. Like you don't have to because so many games are just so much talking and questing and cutscenes and all this shit now. Like
Yep.
a lot of games really want to be TV shows now, and I'm like, why?
Yeah.
We got TV. Do something
Big
else,
time.
right?
Big time. That's such an interesting dichotomy too, because it's like there's this part of me that really I love a really resonant story. Like I really love something like Last of Us obviously is held up there.
Red Dead
There's
Redemption.
right exactly right.
Yeah.
Like there's a couple where it's like, and I find myself playing for stories. Like I find when I play these long open world games, as soon as I'm done the story, I'm done. Like I don't end up going and finishing up maps and all that kind of shit. But at the same time, too, on the flip side, it's like it does still have to be a fun game at the
hmm
core. And it's like if the game isn't good, then I don't. Why would I give a shit about these people?
I really love when not just games, like any media really plays to its medium. You know what I mean?
Mm,
So like I'm not a fan of games that try and be TV shows. So like Red Dead Redemption 2 is a great example. Like it's these all these amazingly acted and framed and there's like cinematography and lighting. Like it is a prestigious TV show that happens to be digital. But it's strung together by a bunch of gameplay that's kind of whatever, right?
yeah.
um, or like there's a lot of like TV shows that want to be movies now, right? Like they're
Hmm.
so serialized and they're telling this huge 15-hour story, and it's like no,
Yeah.
like I miss episodic stuff, right? Like
Big
I don't
time.
know, like my favorite books, for example, like I don't see them being adapted strongly
Hmm.
as
Hmm.
movies because they're so well good as books or
Hmm.
comics or whatever. Like there's so many different ways, and there's games that tell really strong stories, but in a way that's very unique to video games. I find
Yes.
right.
Yep.
Um, a recent one we did was Dark Souls.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Um, where in Dark Souls, like there's no cutscenes or anything. Like there's a story, but you're kind of finding out about it. Like it's kind of like almost like you're like an archaeologist, and it's like exploring the world and like reading things and just like environmental stuff. Right. A lot of Bethesda games do this too. Like
Hmm.
it's like in the placement of things in a shack you find in Fallout or whatever. Right.
Yes.
Like
Yeah. You hack into a computer, you read, and you kind of read the
yeah,
backstory of what happened in that vault or whatever. Right. Yeah.
yeah, and it's like so active because like as a player, like it's like games. That's like games and books are my favorite like mediums for anything
Hmm.
because they're so active. Like I feel like I'm a part of it because like with books, and any sort of writing, like there's a lucid aspect on your end, like you're
Yeah, you're just
picture like
hallucinating. Yeah.
literally, it's like
Yeah.
guided lucid dreaming, right? And in games, like you're in the driver's seat, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I love shit that really leans into that, you
Oh,
know?
I love that. I love that too. I actually I listened to a podcast years ago that was talking about how the argument that they were raising was that video games were the progression of novels, and that the same kind of excitement that you used to get from reading like a new collection of short stories or something was now what you were getting from video games. With TV and movies being their own separate thing, it's interesting because they're both like how do I put it? It's like they're not because they're all sort of within the same realm of like you it's all you experiencing something. But like for some reason, books and video games still feel more personal than TV and movies. And I don't know what that tweak is. I don't know what the nuance is, but it's always felt more intimate or more personal, more one-on-one experiential than going to the movies or something like that.
I think it's I totally agree, and I think it's because like there's not really an audience aspect aside from you, right? I
Sure.
mean, like, Joe will sit and watch me play a video game, but like you don't go to the theater and play it for like 30 strangers, right?
Yes.
And with a
Yeah.
book, like unless I mean, there's the cool, parents reading to their kids, that kind of thing,
Sure.
or audiobooks, I guess. I don't really do audiobooks, but like,
Oh, I'm
I
big on
could
them.
yeah, and I could see that being a way of like sharing that with, people who maybe don't read as much. I think that's amazing. Like it's
Mhm.
this whole it's I've met so many readers who were not readers until they figured out audiobooks, right?
Big time. Big time.
And also people with sensorial issues or whatever, right? So
Mhm.
but yeah, like, sitting on a in a chair with a book, or yeah, sitting at home as I probably will tonight, like with the lights out, playing a game, right? Like,
Yep.
yeah, it's very intimate. It's very intimate.
Yeah.
Especially when you don't do the online thing and you don't get called, racial slurs by 16-year-olds.
Yeah. Oh, I don't do big time. I don't do anything online. I couldn't give a fuck about online anything. I tried getting into I've gone through 2 phases now of playing Fortnite, and both times it's a very, very well made game and it's really fun. But like yeah, no microphones ever. And
Yeah.
and I do end up burning out on it pretty quick because it's just like, oh, it's just one thing,
I still
and
have
I
some long lasting like Halo trauma from high school.
big
Cause like,
time.
yeah, like the Halo games were huge when I was in high school. And also, yeah, people threw around like, the F slur, for example, way more, including probably myself. I'm really glad there's no
Sure.
recordings of my me playing Zanzibar in Halo or whatever, right? There was also that weird period where like the word gay was synonymous with stupid,
Yes.
right? And
Yeah.
like even when I was like 12, I didn't even understand why. I just did. I didn't even know what
Mhm.
gay meant. I was just like, yeah.
Mhm,
Right?
mhm. Oh, and the worst thing you could be called was a gay lord.
Yeah.
That was the oh my god, yeah, that was the start of my trauma. So, I wanna switch gears a little bit. You're in a really interesting kind of position for this show because, having been a guest already, I've posed a few of these questions to you before, and so it's kind of a chance to kind of get a new take on it, and if things have been like kind of reappraised.
Yeah.
And as we've talked about, so much of the show centered around the question of what is a good friend, what is even a friend, and I'm curious, since the last time you were on, has the question of what does it mean to be a friend um changed for you, or do you feel like it's stayed pretty steady?
I think it totally has. Also, it's funny. I was just thinking about when I was on your show. Was my episode lost? You mentioned there's like a lost archive of your older shows.
It might have been, yeah, because I
Yeah.
think it was like the second season, or maybe it was late season one, and
It
yeah,
was
I've taken all of that down.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I remember, because I remember, like, I had just gone through some traumatic, like, friend shit here in Calgary where we recorded, and I spent a
Mhm.
good deal of that episode, like, shitting on a guy
Yes.
who, like, still lives in the same city as me and stuff. And then I remember, like, after recording, like, walking my dog and being like, "Oh man, is he gonna hear that?" And being all like stressed about it and stuff like
Sure.
that. Now I'm like, "Fuck it, whatever." If he finds it, whatever. And it's in some e grave now, but
Exactly.
yeah, no, it's definitely shifted for me. I was thinking about this. Like, I feel like I used to, and for a long time, I defined friendship as like really showing up. for people and supporting them in like tangible ways all the time, 24/7. Um, which is amazing, but also can be exhausting depending how many
Mhm.
people you have in your life, right? And also, like when you're an artist, you kind of count the faces that keep showing up at whatever things you do, or keep downloading, or keep listening, or whatever, right?
Mhm.
Which is really fucked up, honestly. It's really kind of like
It
like
can
you're
be. Yeah.
incentivizing your friends, but also like thanks for coming.
Mhm.
Like I have this friend here in Calgary. I won't name him, but um, like he's a pretty fucked up guy in like a lot of ways, and I have a lot of friends who don't like him, and I understand why they don't like him. But like, motherfucker comes to all my band's shows and like buys
Sure.
all their like he shows so much support, and like that means a lot to me, right? Like
Mhm.
it's tangible. But I think like for me, it's shifted. Like that helps. But I think like in a weird way, like I define friendship as like how much and in what light you think about someone.
Mm.
Because like actually, I was thinking about you the other day because speaking of video games, I just got like a new Xbox. I got like an
Mhm.
Xbox Series S, and sorry, I had a ginger ale burp there. um, Fallout 4 is on there,
Nice.
and like one of our first conversations ever as friends was because Fallout 4 had just come out,
Yeah.
and we were between we were it was while like Act One of a play was it was you and I had time to hang out in the lobby of that theater we worked in,
Yep.
and we were just talking about Fallout. I remember
Yeah.
that's like one of my first memories of doing anything friendy with you, right?
Mhm. Mhm. I remember that conversation. I remember that well. Yeah.
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 And so yeah, and I was like, and this was like yesterday. Like we had planned
Mhm.
this recording, So I mean, you were already in my head, but like I would have like that's like stuck with me, and like even just the fact that like I think about that, I think is like, and it's a very positive, like lovely memory for me. To me, and like I not to get too woo woo woo, but I feel
Yeah.
like you can feel it, even if a
Yes.
friend isn't like maybe you haven't talked to them in a couple weeks or whatever, like on Messenger or whatever, right? But like I feel like when there is that like sort of like you're always in each other's thoughts in a positive
Mhm.
way, right?
Mhm.
I feel like you can feel that. I don't know. And I feel like I've gotten better at sensing when I'm not and then knowing when to like move on, right?
Yes. Yes.
Um but yeah, like 'cause, yeah, like tangible support's cool, but I mean, you and I live in different provinces. It's hard to like
Yeah. You
if you
can't
do
show
a
up for me. Yeah.
yeah, if you do a poetry reading or I'm doing a show or something, right? Like
Mhm.
it's tough, but like, like we're in each other's thoughts and we do chat and we, like I don't know. To me that's a really cool, beautiful kind of friendship. And
Mhm.
I feel like that's been the big shift is like, yeah, like supporting people's cool, but also like the older you get, the more just time becomes a premium, man. Like
Yes.
it's hard.
Yeah.
Like I have
Well,
so many like there's so many sorry, I didn't
no,
mean
no,
to
no,
cut you
please.
off,
No,
but
no, no,
like
no, no.
I have so many like people I know who I just think are so cool and I would super love to like be better friends with them and and they're doing such cool shit, but I'm also like, man, I don't have the spoons, right? Like honestly, when I
Yeah.
navigate like my time and like things I do for my wellness and whatever, it's like, yeah, and knowing that that's okay too. Like a friendship can be here instead of here kind
Mhm.
of thing, right? I just did a hand motion. It's a podcast. You can't fucking see me,
I
but
love it. I love it. But that's exactly right. That's it right there. That's what I was gonna say was that it's like to me, it's not about quantity. To me, it's about someone respecting their capacity and only giving when they can. I think, I'm somebody who in the past and I mean I continue. This is something I'm addressing in my behavior to this day is that I'll overgive and then I'll burn out and then that will make me resent the person, you know?
Mhm.
And then I'll be blaming them for choices I made. And like that's not okay for any of us. And so it's like I have a much deeper respect for people who hold their own capacity as the central tenet of everything. And if you can only show up once every 6 months, I'd way rather that than you showing up every 6 days and hating me for it.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, I have a much deeper respect for quality over quantity every time at this point.
I love that. That's a really good way of putting it. Like I have a friend named Lucas who we've been friends for like 20 something years and we'll go
Mhm.
months without talking sometimes,
Yeah,
And then shit, he might be coming over tonight for dinner. I don't know. Like we just
exactly.
kind of fallen out of touch, but like
Yeah.
it's always there and I always know like we're never far from each other's thoughts, right? And
Mhm,
also
mhm.
like if the shit really hit the fan, like, we would be there. Just like I would for, you or anyone else I feel close with in that way, right? But
Literally.
when you're just living your lives, like, yeah, I don't know. Sometimes you're on cruise control. So I'm in school right now, so I only have
Mhm,
so much time, right?
mhm.
The people who don't, People make you feel shitty for that. I don't know, man. It's exhausting. I'm just like, I
Yep.
don't, Joe was supposed to have, um, she was supposed to. I'm trying to remember it was this friend that had asked to hang out with her one on one, and then her friend was like, "Why don't we do a double date?" And then Joe asked me, and I was like, "Well, I work on Saturdays now, so I don't really want to go out on Friday because
Mhm.
I'm gonna want to stay out, and then I'm gonna feel like shit."
Yep. Yep.
And then this friend was like super disappointed about that,
Mm.
and there wasn't like a guilt trip there, but there was this like externalization of the disappointment, and Joe, who's very empathetic, like instantly picked up on it and felt really bad. And I'm like,
Mhm.
literally, there's no reason to feel bad. We're all
No,
like 30 something. Like, what? We got shit going on. I got to
literally.
work, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
that's been something for me too to navigate is that like my new job, is Monday to Friday, 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. So
Damn.
it's like, and it's the best job I've ever had. I love it. It's not
Where
going
are you working?
anywhere.
What
It's
do you do? I
it's
guess.
it's remote work. It's remote work, and I'm a digital instructor. So I
Cool.
do the thing is that the head office is in Ontario, so all the programs are built off of Eastern Standard Time.
This is my
Uh,
dream. I want to
yeah,
work remotely so bad. This is my.
I love it. I love it so much. It's going nowhere so long as they'll have me. I love it so much. But it's rough. The hours are rough. And that doesn't leave me a lot of capacity for friends, for dating, for anything like that. And so I'm okay with that. But it's like it's figuring out ways to communicate that with, especially with new people. Like trying to date, trying to get new people in my life, and being like, look, I don't have the capacity for like seeing you all the time. Like this is going to be like a once every couple weeks thing, and we're just going to go real slow. And
Yeah.
and that's not because I don't like you. It's because I have priorities that I have to focus on first. And some people take that in stride, and some people take that as an insult. And I can't control how people take that on. I can just hold my boundaries and say, well, that is what it is. It's not me being cruel. It's not me being cold. It's me taking care of myself.
Yep.
And that's something I had to really learn is that like boundaries are actually an act of love. They're not an act of opposition or punishment. They're saying this is how I can show up best for you is if you play within these parameters.
I think you literally said that to me when I was in Vancouver, and like I stuck with. I still remember that. Like that stuck with me because I love that. I really
Yeah,
struggle with that.
big
I
time.
uh, I didn't have a lot of friends when I was a kid. I was bullied a lot and shit, and so
Hmm.
I have this problem where I'll overcommitting. Like I'll just like I get really afraid of being alone,
Hmm.
and so I will like hold on to friendships that are really not serving me well past
Yep,
their expiration date because I don't want to. The thought of being by myself terrifies me.
big time.
Um, Honestly, the pandemic was really good for that, and for me, like I learned a lot. I really learned how to be alone and be really
Yeah.
happy alone, right?
Hmm.
Um, and even like navigating, like Joe and I have been navigating ways of like purposefully inserting some distance in our relationship. Like like she's been accepting work like in Edmonton, so like
Hmm.
I'll be alone in the house for myself for a couple days or whatever, right? Like
Hmm.
which has been really like it sounds weird, but like really is awesome. Like for a long term not even just romantic relationship. It loops right back to like not talking to a friend for a while because then it's like you got so much more to talk about, right? Like we
Exactly.
got to make an hour of content here, friend. How the fuck are we gonna do that?
Literally. Like if I already know everything, I'm not going to think to
Yeah,
ask it.
exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
So no, it's yeah, but yeah, I was really afraid of like being alone for like so long, and on some level, I still subconsciously do. But
Hmm.
I also really crave it now a lot more than I used to, which I think is
Mhm.
progress for me at
Big
least.
time, big time.
Yeah.
That actually leads me into, I've been introducing this new kind of segment of questions that has been centered around this idea of community. It's something you hear often about is this idea of like being in community or who's your community, chosen community, all the terms. And again, it comes back to these questions of like it's obviously very easily defined word, but then I feel like internally it's a very nebulous word. For me, it can mean so many different things. And so I'm really curious when you hear the word community, what would you define a community as?
Oh man. Like shit. Good question. But like so I'm like learning how to interview right now and they're like open-ended questions. Oh, that's like the most open-ended question, right? Um
I worry sometimes I make too broad a question of
no,
like,
it's
yeah.
I love it. For me, like I feel like community is like this inherently human and as a result inherently very anti-capitalist concept because I don't think capitalism is computable with being a human.
Nope.
That's right. But like I mean so many of the aspects of like community from like mutual aids to like bonding over a thing that you already own, to like being there for people instead of having to rely on nebulous taxpayer funded things. Like these are things that go against the buy and sell and like dog eat dog individualistic sort of mindset that we're like forced into. Like one of the
Mhm.
most interesting things I think about the pandemic was we were all asked here in the West at least to do this extremely like communal thing, like stay home for the greater good, right? But at the same time, we were expected to adhere to this like you got to pay your rent,
Yes.
got to go buy groceries, right? So like
Mhm.
for me, like there was no pandemic. I worked through the whole thing.
Same.
And I
Yeah.
worked around a lot of people who did not give a shit about wearing masks, did not give a shit about whatever. Because I worked in construction, so somehow I was an essential worker. I'm not essential. I put
Right.
lights up for rich fucking assholes, right?
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But like, um, yeah, like community really excites me because to me, like true community, whether it's your block or your Dune fan club or your whatever your podcasts, like is so against the grain of this like depressing like capitalist hellscape. I get really nihilistic too, but then like genuine communities really excite me. Really,
Yeah.
I was recently I'm jumping all over the place with this.
No,
Big
fuck yeah.
question, right?
Jump in.
I was recently in New York. I went to New York back in May,
Mhm.
and we really wanted to see a drag show
Mm.
because Joanna loves drag, and like we're both queer, and it was just important to us. And like
Mhm.
Stonewall's there, right?
Fuck yeah.
We wound up going to this drag bar in Brooklyn called Come On Everybody, which is an awesome name. And it was this grungy. It was like a Sunday night, and there was like maybe 8 people there, but
Yeah.
you could tell that they're there every fucking Sunday,
Yes.
And
Yep.
it was such a cool. And they were the minute the host, she's a drag queen. I can't remember her name. She was on Dragula, which is like a
Okay.
horror RuPaul's Drag Race.
Fuck yeah.
But she was like, we got internationals in the house, like when they heard that we're Canadian, right? And like they were so welcoming to us, and like instantly I felt like I was kind of afraid to go. It's a
Sure.
new bar in a new city at like 2 a.m., right?
New
Like
York, baby. Yeah.
New York. But like I felt so at home and so like I was like, yeah, I'd be here every fucking week too, right? And
Mhm.
and that would be really empowering because like I wouldn't feel the need to like fill that void with I don't know, another Netflix subscription or some shit. I don't know.
Sure.
Like just it's just so against. Do you get what I'm saying? Like it's
I
just
do.
I really feel like actual awesome communities like go against this just mindless consumption, which
Well,
I think is awesome, right?
it's why people go to church,
Yeah.
people, you're right, like
Yes.
we are a communal beast, right? It's like at the heart of it, it's not the dogma, it's the community, and it's why people fight as hard as they do for the beliefs they have because they think that they're protecting their community,
Hmm.
and it's one of the elements in so many of these conversations, these culture conversations that I get so frustrated in is that both sides invariably and very impulsively dehumanize the other side and don't realize that like what they're arguing for is for the protection of their community. You don't agree with it, and you're right. A lot of the times it endangers other communities. There's violence. There's like these are not. I'm not saying and everyone's valid and everybody has a voice. Like that's not what I'm raising. But it's like behind every argument is I feel in danger and I feel like my community's in danger, so I'm fighting to protect it. And the sooner we can realize that it's all people,
Yeah.
that it's not like good people and monsters, like it's like the easier it is to sort of find bridges and to find connective tissue, um again, it comes back to that thing of like the iteration. It's the increments, like you don't have to suddenly become best friends with some MAGA guy, but it's like that MAGA guy isn't an inhuman beast. He's just a guy who has, a community that he thinks he's fighting for. I don't agree whatsoever with the guy, but that doesn't make him inhuman, you know?
Yep. Oh, you're speaking my language. It's and like we have way more in common with those folks than like I don't know, you and I would have in common with like Jeff Bezos or some shit, right?
Big
Like
time.
that's the thing too is like it just keeps us divided.
Hmm.
That's like a bumper sticker, but like really like it the more we get at each other's throats communally, like the less we see the bigger picture and the less we
Hmm.
like know that power. It's also interesting too though cuz like yeah, like I really feel like the human brain is still wired for like village living, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
like even the idea of like having a kid, um Joe and I are a cis presenting couple, so we get this question all the time: when are you having kids? Right? We
Mhm.
don't really want kids, and part of the reason is like when you go back in history, like raising a kid was a very communal thing. It was like a thing a
Mhm.
village did,
Yes.
right? Like,
Yep.
and now like the parameters have shifted so much, and the expectation on us financially has shifted so much that it's like I don't
Mhm.
know how you do it without a massive support system, right? Like
Yep.
my mom divorced my dad and fell back on her family and her grandfather and stuff to help
Mhm.
raise me, which was amazing. Of
Mhm.
course but like a lot of people would look down on her for that because she couldn't like hoist her fucking
Bootstrap her.
bootstraps.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep. Yep.
exactly. Same
Yep.
brain. Um, but yeah, and I mean, that's the other, I think that's the toxic side of community too, is yeah, like we have these like phones and computers and we have access to like too many communities and too many points of view. And like, I really pride myself on how little some people know about me. Cause I'm like,
Mm.
I know way too much about other people's personal lives. And I'm like,
Mhm.
people I've like met at a party like 3 years ago on Instagram. And I'm like,
Why do I know
why do,
everything about you?
yeah, I'm like, come on.
Yeah.
I don't care.
I always call it like we're all alone together, you know,
Oh
because
yeah.
it's like it makes us feel unified, but really we're all just alone because I'm not with you. When I look at your photo or I look at your tweet or whatever it is I see, I'm not with you. I'm alone in my room and you're alone in your room. We're not communicating. This
Hmm.
isn't an interaction as our bodies understand it, you know. It's this really weird thing that our nervous systems are not attuned to and can't attune to, and it's become so ubiquitous in our daily life that it's like, you know, I think especially post pandemic, but obviously beforehand, is that it's like it's so pervasive to our entire daily lives that like we're just in a constant state of just regulation because like we're forced to play within these machines that are not good for our bodies, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. I just thought of a like I guess a counter question on this because I love this community
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah,
But
yeah, fire away.
do you feel like communities get stronger when they're smaller or larger, or is it like not black and white? Like because I have some thoughts on that,
I
but I'd be interested
love
to
that question. I love
yeah.
that question, and that's something I think about all the time. I was actually we were in a previous episode just recently. We kind of dive into that, and I'm of two minds because I actually you know, I think the culture as a grand conversation has been pushing for inclusivity, and I think that the spirit of that is good, but I think that we're as a monkey brain not wired for too many connections. I think that inevitably the individual is actually better served in smaller circles. And I think that's why we're always so anxious because we're on Twitter networks, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram where some people have hundreds and thousands of followers. And so we're just staring at strangers, you know, and as soon as you hit the capacity for connective, you know, recognition, everyone becomes an enemy because you become a stranger face, you know. And so I think internally we're much stronger in smaller communities, and I've been on this for a couple of years now of like I think exclusivity is kind of the next like punk rock of
Mm,
like actually no, this is for no one, this is for just us, and like not even sharing it online, not even pushing for, you know, I'm gonna write a book and I'm not gonna publish it, or I'm gonna write a, you know, like Wu Tang, like recording that album and selling one copy. You know, like it's like
mm-hmm.
that's the kind of shit that I'm kind of interested in. Like, I mean, maybe that's a bit of a funny stretch example, but it's like, um, you know, it's just the idea of like small networks, you know, not trying to become these global, you know, I think the idea of massive followings has been really destructive to the psyche of the artist because they don't see themselves as successful unless they sell X amount of albums or X amount of books or whatever. And it's like, no, you wrote a fucking book. You're successful. Done. End of story. Fuck finances, you know? Like just get a job. It's fine. It's fine
Yeah.
to have a job and be an artist. That's okay, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I believe in smaller networks and smaller communities, maybe also because inside I'm very similar to you where like I'd never really had a lot of friends growing up and I never really learned how to keep friends, and so I feel instinctively safer around smaller groups, you know,
Yep.
because it's what I'm more used to, right?
Well, there's more of like an honestness and like honestly like it's just more interesting kind
Mhm.
when the more niche it gets, right?
Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
yeah, like as things, I like to look at this through the lens of like nerd communities because it's kind of
Totally.
safe to like analyze it because it's not really a social issue type thing, right? But
Mhm.
like two things that I really enjoy, like that are quote unquote nerdy,
Mhm.
like Dune, I mentioned already, the
Mhm.
book by Frank
Mhm.
Herbert. And then yeah, the Dark Souls games, but the whole like FromSoft, that like Soulsborne community, right?
Mhm.
Both of those like nerd, those are both pretty niche and like in their own little dark, dank fucking online corners of like Reddit or whatever for like a while, right? And it was kind of this cool shorthand of like, I don't know, I'd be like at a party and someone mentions like, like a boss from Dark Souls, and I'm
Yeah.
like, yo, right? Like there's like
Mhm.
an instant
Mhm.
connection there, right? But with Dark Souls, a game called Elden Ring recently came out, and it
Yes.
was like the most massive, huge, fucking successful thing, and it brought in like so many new players. And then with Dune, the movies are coming out now, and they're like huge blockbusters. So now there's a huge influx of fans who have seen the movies and they think they're like a cool sci-fi thing and whatever, right? And like ultimately, like for the artist, I think it's a good thing because they're getting way more like exposure. But these communities are like fracturing now, and
Mhm.
this happened with Star Wars like fucking decades ago, right?
Yes.
Like,
Yes. Yep.
and it just keeps Star Wars is fat. That'd be like a fucking university paper, like
Oh,
that
big time.
discourse, because like it keeps cascading through the generations because now it's like a 50-year-old thing, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And again, it's just safer to like analyze it. I find like when you apply this thought to like drag communities or queer cultures or whatever, right? People get a lot more heated. I
Yeah.
find not that
Well,
nerds
because
aren't heated,
well, it's
but
because it's people, right? It's the difference is that it's like you're talking about a person's culture versus a piece of culture, you
sure,
know?
yeah,
I always equate I've yet to fully crack the thought, but I had this flash inspiration about Star Wars a few years ago that I've continued to pick at where I think Star Wars is the current equivalent to like Catholicism in that
cool,
it's
yeah,
like you're raised in it as a child, you're inundated as a child. It's all like big black and white, good, evil melodrama, and then you sort of lose your faith as you grow up. And then like you sometimes come back to it out of guilt, but then the people who have maintained it, who have stayed really in it as adults, have like completely ruined it and
oh,
made it really
yeah.
aggressive and really, really vitriolic and violent. And like I say, like I haven't quite cracked it, but there's something in there. There's a thought in there that I'm trying to pick at still.
When you write that poem, please send it my way.
Exactly,
But
exactly. Yeah.
yeah, like yeah, and I just noticed like it's this weird thing where it's like both things at once. Like it's really cool that all these new people are getting to this into this art form. It's also, I understand missing your small weirdo little community, right?
Exactly.
It's why I've been getting into like really nerdy fantasy books because it's like it's kind of in my mind the last true nerdy like sphere,
Mhm,
right? Like
mhm,
like all these like Brandon Sanderson books or whatever like that are, I don't read him, but that's just an example, right? Like
mhm,
of like there's no HBO miniseries, there's no coffee mugs with their logos on it, there's no
mhm.
like, it's not, it's genuinely dorky and like very in its own, and there's like globally maybe a couple million readers if you're
Sure.
like really lucky and optimistic. But and then yeah, like I noticed this a lot. I was talking about drag, right? Where I'm like, yeah, there's something there. I don't know what the answer is because I understand. Like, I think it's really cool that people from all these different backgrounds are getting more and more into drag performance. But at the same time, I understand the gay men who miss having their gay men community, right?
Mhm,
Without
mhm.
AFAB folks or trans folks or whatever there. And that's not a. I'm not saying that like in a
No, no,
way
no.
where I agree with like trans exclusion or whatever because fuck that. But like
Mhm.
at the same time, like yeah, I understand like missing. Like you said, I think it's the monkey brain. It's like
Yeah.
the I miss when it was just the five of us, and it was like
Yep.
a safe space almost, right?
Mhm, mhm. Well, and
And
that's
yeah,
just it. Like, safe spaces aren't so that everyone can be safe in them. Safe spaces are so that the people who created that space are safe within it because they're
yeah,
not safe as well. And so they don't actually owe anyone else anything. Like, that is their safe space, and they don't owe even people who are a part of their community. They don't owe that safety to.
hmm,
Like that's not for them. And that's a really hard nuance to play within, especially within marginalized communities, to like impose those kinds of boundaries on people who are looking for safety is really hard. And I don't think that I know I haven't seen anyone, myself included, stick that landing,
mm-mm,
but I think it is a worthy endeavor, to
yep,
keep working on, you know, to use like a tech parlance because I'm working within it now to like niche down, you know?
Yeah.
You know, like just keep on finding the smaller fractions, right? But
We'll loop back to that. Don't worry. What do you like for you? Like, what do you what's one of the most relatable portrayals of friendship? Like in a piece, like in a movie or a book or a podcast or whatever for you. And
oh my god, what a great question.
I
I
ask this because I've been watching reruns of Seinfeld recently, right? And like reflecting
okay.
on the friendship those characters have, right?
Yeah.
Which is like very interesting because it was so different from the kumbaya shit that like, Friends or Cheers sold, right?
Totally.
And in a way,
Yeah.
like in a depressing way, I found it very relatable because I was like, yeah, especially when I was younger, I'm like, yeah, I would just kind of hang out with my friends and judge other people and bitch about my life for like,
Totally.
those are some of my best friends in the world, right?
And you kinda almost wonder I do sometimes wonder, like, how they're friends other than through their sort of shared hatred, which I guess is a way to build a community, you know? But, like,
Hmm.
there are moments where I'm like, "How are you even friends with each other?" You know? Like, it
Yeah.
doesn't always click for me, but I think for me, I mean, you know, the go-to one would be the hobbits, would be the 4 hobbits,
Ah,
would be Sam and Frodo, and then Merry and Pippin. I think as 2 couples and then also as a foursome, I think are really a beautiful demonstration of not only, like, you know, intimacy and vulnerability, but also like the ability to be there in play and then in need, you know, and, like they're there to fuck around with fireworks, but they're also there to have each other's backs, and you know, and so like I think I always come back to the hobbits as like a very genuine portrayal of a kind of masculinity that I really wish was more common, you know, of
I was
like,
gonna say
you
that
know,
says a lot about you and like how you
yeah,
feel about intimacy.
yeah, like
Because
touch each other's face, you know, like
yeah,
cry a little, wipe away your boyfriend's tears, you know,
hmm,
like I love that shit, right? Cry in front of your friends in general, you know, like fuck
yeah.
yeah, right?
It's a weird one, but like for me, honestly, and like I catch me drunk at a party sometime, and I'll go off about this. But
Mm.
the Trailer Park Boys, hear
Mm.
me out. Like that whole show is one of the most progressive pieces of like masculine media, in my opinion, ever, and no
You
one ever gives it its due
you
in
know,
that way.
I've never gotten deep enough into it, but I am familiar enough with it that like whenever I would watch it, I was like, "Oh no, this actually is like this slaps," you know?
Yeah,
Like,
because like yeah, the main three, the Trailer Park Boys, like Ricky, Julie, and Bubbles, like they were hugging each other and saying "I love you," and it was not. There's no laugh track. There's no nothing.
yep,
In like 2002, on a network television show,
yep,
right?
yep.
There's like queer and polyamorous characters in the community. No one shames them for that. There's no like
Mhm,
weirdness around that, right? There's a lot of other like shade thrown at each other, and there's a lot of really crass humor, but it's like there is this undercurrent of like warmth
mhm.
that contrasts really beautiful. I think it's a brilliant show, and people think
Mm.
I'm like joking when I say that. I'm like, no, no, no. I think it's like honestly, at least before Netflix bought it, but like
Sure.
its original run on Showcase and like that you would just catch on TV sometimes was so revolutionary. And
Mm.
for me also, yeah, like because at the same time you had sitcoms like Scrubs, for example,
Mhm.
where like the main character is like half the jokes are about how he's gay because he like
Yeah,
hangs out with his male best friend too much, right?
yeah, yeah.
And it's so dated. It's just
Mhm,
especially now, right?
mhm,
And then yeah, like it's just yeah, because I love that like the warmth, especially between like men, right?
mhm, mhm.
And it's like yeah, like you ever you ever had someone be like no homo, but you look really good. I'm
Yeah,
like okay,
I know, yeah,
like I do look good, thank you, right? But
exactly,
why
exactly.
did you
It's
need
like
to add that?
exactly. It's like, I mean, like, just like, yeah, I fucking hate that caveat so goddamn much. I just like, no, like, yes, homo, more homo, actually, you
Yeah,
know? Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, Lord of the Rings is just beautiful.
Mhm,
God, Aragorn, the way he
mhm,
treats everyone around him,
mhm,
right? Men
yep,
and women.
mhm.
Mostly men. It's
Well, yeah.
Tolkien, but
Isn't there, like there's, like, 2 women in the whole book, so it's like,
well,
you know.
the movies really amped it because
Yeah.
Arwen's barely in the books, right? Like
Yeah, she's, like, in the appendices or something, right? You know? Yeah.
it's mostly Eowyn is
Yeah.
mostly and she's awesome.
Yeah.
Eowyn's tight, but
I think the other one that I would say, the one that just popped into my brain would be Troy and Abed from Community.
oh hell yeah,
I think because they like, I think what I really love about them is that like when they came together, they kind of didn't like each other. Like you watch them in season one, and they're both kind of like standoffish, but then they start finding. You literally can watch them find stuff that they like together, and
Hmm.
that friendship grow. And then the way they like allow each other to just be who they are. Like Troy doesn't change Abed, Abed doesn't change Troy. They just find stuff they like and they allow each other to just be who they are. And like
Yeah.
when they like stuff together, they love it. And when they don't like stuff together, they let each other do that thing, you know? And
One other
I just really value that.
one totally. I haven't seen Community. It's on my
Mm.
God. I know I'll love it.
It's my number
It's
one.
some
It's of all the like nebulous sitcom, it's my number one all timer. I love it.
yeah. It's like it's so many people that I like respect love it, and has so many artists involved that I like. I know I'll get obsessed, but
Hmm.
like a recent one. Did you see that Dungeons and Dragons? You said you're not going to the movies a lot,
I
but there was a
haven't seen it
Dungeons.
yet. I want to watch it, but I haven't seen it yet.
So it's very good, and there's a bard played by Chris Pine, and there's a
Yes,
barbarian played by Michelle Rodriguez,
love it.
and they are like such close friends, and it's like it's such a great middle ground because a lot of people do the mask and femme friendship and they avoid all romantic tension,
Hmm.
right? And then of course the norm for years was eventually they'll wind up together, right?
Yeah.
But they do this really great because to me neither of those is realistic because like I don't know, you get drunk at a party and sometimes you just flirt and it doesn't
Hmm.
mean anything. I don't know.
Yeah.
And that like aspect is really well represented with the two of them. But then also like they're very tender with each other in a very platonic way. Like at
Mm.
one point, um, I was watching it. It was one of the first movies I've seen by myself in a while. Like
Mm.
I got off work early one day and I was like, I'm gonna go see this movie I want to see. And like she breaks up with a character that she was like married to, and then afterwards she's like extremely sad. And Chris Pine's bard just sings her a song,
Mm.
and it's just played straight, and it just like happens. And I was like, man, like in a Marvel movie or something, there'd be a joke here, there'd be some like
Yeah.
bathos, but it was just very genuine and sweet,
Mm.
and like there was like flirty moments, but it was just fun. Like it wasn't implying anything, and they don't wind up together.
Hmm.
They're just old friends that are
I love it. I love
shooting the
it.
shit. Yeah, like I'm gonna keep my eye out more for this because I like
Hmm.
it's good job me. Good question.
Right? Yeah. No, I love it. And I just yeah, I think, the idea of I mean, it's one of the central questions of the show is this idea of like friend intimacies. And like, I'm always on about like touch of friends. I'm always on about like, like platonic intimacy. I think is a really, really valid and really lost art of like, well, I can't get close to them because then we'll fuck. And it's like, no,
Hmm.
you could just be really vulnerable and intimate with somebody and like, and yeah, maybe you'll kiss, cool, but like cross that bridge when you do and navigate that and negotiate that, like you can also fuck your friends if you want to. It doesn't have to suddenly escalate into something, like there's lots of options here. It doesn't have to be on this like heteronormative escalator of like, well, we kiss, so now we have to fuck, so now we have to move in together, so now we have to get married, so now we have to have kids. Like, no, you could just like be cool, you know?
Yeah, I feel like people just want to like collect so many labels for themselves,
Yeah.
including with their relationships and their friendships. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, this is even like, yeah, this is my fuck buddy, and this is my
Hmm.
best friend, and this is my work call. It's like I don't know. It's all just it's all a spectrum, right?
Hmm. It's all just people.
Hmm.
You know, fuck, Nathan, we could talk forever, and this is the best part about you, and this is why I just love you so goddamn much, is that like, yeah,
I
we
love you
could
too,
not
man.
talk for, we could not talk for 6 months, and then suddenly it's just like, oh yeah, it's an hour just goes back in a just a breeze,
I love it.
but I do need to wrap up here, but I wanna first, I've got two little questions for you. One is, as always, I love to leave my listeners with a little bit of like an actionable thing that they could try out this week, and so I'm wondering if you have one thing that people could try this week to be a better friend to, themselves, to their community, to the people around them.
Yeah, mine's a double barrel. It's kind of two in one. Um, it relates to what I was saying about how I feel about friendship. I think it'd be really cool if on the one hand, if you have a friend that maybe you haven't seen or been around a lot lately, just or maybe it is a friend you are around a lot, but um, find something they're doing and support it in some way.
Mm.
If they're in a band, go see their band, or if they're writing online, go read an article, give it a click, whatever, just some way. And you don't have to tell them you'll do that, but do
Yeah.
that. So I think that's important. But on the other side, if someone doesn't show up for you and there's that twinge of like disappointment, forgive them. Just just
Yeah.
just in that you don't have to forgive them for everything, but just for that, just be like, you know what, they're probably busy and that doesn't speak to our friendship, right? And just I think the duality of that I think says a lot about how you feel about the people, right? And obviously, I mean, don't let yourself get taken advantage of in either way. But yeah, I think show up for someone and then forgive someone for not showing up for you, because
Mm.
that's the reality. We all do that. We're all
Mhm.
going to do that, right?
Yeah. Grace is a really big thing that I've been on a lot recently. Is this idea of like give people grace,
Yeah.
and try to be like you say. You don't have to get run over. You don't have to be steamrolled, but like give people the grace and the understanding that they have lives too and they are complex beings, right? You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I adore you. I just think the absolute world of you, man. Is there this episode's not gonna be out for a little bit, so I don't know, is there anything you want to plug, or is there anywhere that you'd like listeners to find you, anything they want you want them to follow you on?
Well, I love you too, man. I adore you too. Love it. I just love chatting with you.
Yeah.
Do you know whenabouts this will be out, roughly? Or
I don't.
okay,
It's sometime in October.
okay. Well, if you just search my name, some stuff I've written, it goes online too. Again, I'm just doing freelance writing right now while I'm in school. But yeah, if you could like click anything where you see, like I've done some writing for the scene for the AMPA here in Alberta. Um, Turns out there's a lot of print magazines here, which is pretty cool. But they're
Fuck yeah.
mostly in Edmonton.
Fair.
um, yeah, and yeah, the band and the podcast really, but if they're not, they're both kind of weird. If they're not your thing, I get it. But also I always say with the podcast, like it's about games, but it's really just us. It's a lot of people listen who don't play video games and just have a lot of fun,
Yeah.
doing the parasocial podcast hangout thing, right?
Mhm.
And just give it a whirl. I think you'll enjoy it. But
Fuck yeah.
yeah, those are kind of my three major things right now.
Awesome. Well, that's going to be all in the show notes. Yeah, I one more time, thank you so much for coming on the show. I love you, and I hope you have just the best fucking evening.
Bye, James.
And that's it. Thank you one more time to Nathan for coming on the show. It was an absolute pleasure to catch up with him and chat, and I hope I get a chance to see him soon. If you like the show, please be sure to give it a 5-star review anywhere you listened. It's free, and it helps me out so much. And if you want more Friendless content, be sure to sign up for the Friendless Substack. It's a weekly update of all things going on in my life. I've started doing these top 10 good things that happened this week lists that are a ton of fun, as well as giving music recommendations. And I give a deep dive into one thing that I've been hyperfixated on that week. All that and so much more. It's a ton of fun. Sign up in the show notes. It's free, and I think you're going to love it. But that's it for me, so let's just wrap this up here. I hope to see you back here next week, but I'm not going to worry about that right now, and neither should you, because that is then, and this is now. So for now, all I'm going to say is I love you, and I wish you well. Fun and safety, sweeties.